The era of good feelings. Quick note here, you'll notice this is part of chapter 9, so we're jumping really far ahead just for this one little section that can be covered on your exam too, so just be kind of aware of it. So the era of good feelings. This is actually the time period between 1817 through 1823. Basically, without the Federalist Party, it basically enables the Republicans to govern in this spirit of nonpartisan harmony. So despite that, Republicans are going to realize and basically come to an appreciation of some of the Federalist doctrines, such as a centralized national power and the creation of a bank. And so they are going to go on to create the second Bank of the United States, which was very much modeled after Hamilton's original bank in 1816. This bank has tremendous economic power. It is very large. It is the official depository and dispenser of government funds as well. The other thing is that during the War of 1812, basically all of the embargoes that we've seen, leading up to it and then during it had forced a lot of American businessmen to manufacture goods that they had previously imported. And so the United States Congress wanted to protect these new manufacturers of goods, and so we get the first protective tariff in American history, the Tariff of 1816. So remember, protective tariff is more about protecting the manufacturers, whereas previously when we had tariffs, it was more about making money and revenue for the government. This was very much about protecting these producers. It levies about 20 to 25% on imported goods that could have been produced in the United States, and the revenue goes to transportation projects. We'll get more into what those transportation projects are later. This will be like the Erie Canal and stuff. It's quite a bit from now. We're also going to see the United States is going to expand a little bit more during this time period and is looking west and looking towards becoming a continental empire. John Quincy Adams is going to be the Secretary of State under James Monroe. So keep in mind, we had Washington for 2 terms, then we had Adams for 1 term, we had Jefferson 2 terms, Madison for 2 terms, and then we're going to have James Monroe for 2 terms. So John Quincy Adams is the Secretary of State under Monroe. And Quincy Adams, who was actually the son of John Adams, wanted America to stretch from, Atlantic to Pacific, and he was basically willing to use whatever tactics necessary. We're going to see, partly due to Quincy Adams' efforts, a new pattern of Anglo-American cooperation during this time period, so treaties with Great Britain. This is going to include things like the Rush-Bagot Agreement of 1817. This limited naval armaments on the Great Lakes. This basically demilitarized the border between the United States and Canada. And actually today, the border between the United States and Canada is the largest demilitarized border in all of the world. Another agreement that comes out of this is going to be the Anglo-American Accords of 1818. This basically resolves a lot of the issues, well, some of the issues left over after the War of 1812. Things like American fishing rights off of Labrador and Newfoundland, and it is going to establish the boundary of the Louisiana Territory at the 49th parallel. That's why you have that really nice border along much of the United States, between the United States and Canada. And it would establish joint occupation of Oregon. Now, as much as now Quincy Adams has that Atlantic to Pacific on some level, Quincy Adams also wanted Florida, but Florida was owned by Spain at this time. Still, in March of 1818, Andrew Jackson, the hero of New Orleans and everything, he led troops across the border into Spanish-held Florida. He would go on to destroy a few encampments of Seminole Indians, seize 2 Spanish forts, and execute 2 British subjects on the grounds that they were selling armaments to Native Americans for raids against the Americans. Now, the thing is, when Jackson did all of this, he had definitely exceeded his orders on some level. However, Quincy Adams backs him up and supports him and basically told Spain that Jackson was just defending American interests, and in fact, he might have to be unleashed again if necessary. just a little bit of a underlying threat there. So much so that Spain would end up yielding to this American threat in the Transcontinental Treaty of 1819, where the United States would annex East Florida and Spain would recognize the prior American seizures of West Florida back from 1810 and 1813. This basically secures the American hold over the Pacific coast, but also partly because Spain is also going to renounce in this treaty as well any claim to the Pacific Northwest. In turn, the United States is also going to renounce their shaky claim to like Texas under the Louisiana Purchase. So finally we're getting the Louisiana Purchase's boundaries really ironed out. Now all of this is going to lead us to the Monroe Doctrine of 1823. Basically, we have this new Anglo-American cooperation leading to the British foreign minister proposing in 1823 that the United States and Britain should issue this joint declaration opposing any kind of European attempt to recolonize South America or like assist Spain in regaining any of its colonies. Now Monroe is going to actually reject this idea, but only at the insistence of Quincy Adams, because if they had gone forward with this, it would have meant that the United States would have had to pledge not to annex any kind of former Spanish territory, which would include things like California and Texas. And Quincy Adams was really confident that at some point America would take, California, Texas, and, maybe even Cuba. That one doesn't happen. And so basically, Quincy Adams really wanted to maintain that the United States had the freedom of action for future acquisitions, as well as maintain that America wasn't beholden to Great Britain. The second part of this that goes into the Monroe Doctrine is that James Monroe also wanted to cement his relationship between the United States and a lot of the new nations of Latin America that he had actually refused to recognize formally until 1822. Thus, we get the Monroe Doctrine of 1823. So America's doing it on its own. In this doctrine, Monroe is going to declare to Congress that the Americas, and I quote, are henceforth not to be considered as subjects for future colonization by any European power. So this is really kind of giving the United States of America precedence over a lot of issues that could occur in the future in North and South America. But another part of the Monroe Doctrine as well was that the United States would pledge not to interfere in the internal affairs of the European states. And this is really, really, really important because the Monroe Doctrine is actually what is quoted when it comes to should the United States get involved in World War I, basically a century later. So kind of keep that in mind. So looking at all of Jeffersonian America, this is part of your journal. What is similar to today and what is different?